Mm,
Here we go.
Okay.
Hello, I am Deb Coviello, the Drop In CEO. And as always, I want to thank you for dropping in and listening to week after week the most amazing leaders that I bring on the show so they can share their insights with you and hopefully inspire you. And just know I do this work. We have the podcast because I sincerely care about all C suite leaders of today and I'll say of tomorrow to navigate their challenges with confidence. And this week, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Jay Schumann, PhD, who is a high integrity food and beverage industry senior leader with a 3 decade track record of success leading corporate microbiology and supply chain food safety teams and labs to deliver insights, policies, programs, and solutions to meet new product innovation, food safety, quality assurance, productivity, and training needs of multiple CPG food businesses. He goes on and on. He's a highly talented technical leader, but also a thought leader. I just want to say, Jay, thank you so much for dropping in on the show.
Oh, thank you very much, Deb. It's really a pleasure to be with you today, and I appreciate what you're doing and the way you're sharing your expertise with the world.
Oh, I appreciate that. I mean, hey, this is our stage to be able to
Mm,
share what we know, what we think, and in the
mm,
process of we getting to know each other, our listeners are going to be inspired. But just for excuse me, those of you out there, the reason why I brought Jay, I've been actually talking to Jay for several years now, and I realized he was incredibly smart, technically competent in his area of expertise, but also a deep thought leader. And sometimes you don't get that with all C-suite leaders. So we're going to go a little bit into his background and what he's accomplished, but also he has some strong thoughts that I think you will find very insightful. So, Jay, I'm going to pass it back over to you
Okay.
to kind of share a bit about yourself with the audience and your career journey.
Okay, thank you, Deb. Yeah, I looked a little bit more at your background this week leading up to this conversation. I know you're a STEM professional, as particularly an engineer, so you functioned a lot in your earlier chapters in engineering and technology. I'm sort of the first two letters of STEM, science and technology. I'd say at my core, what I bring to my profession, how I earn a living, is a scientist. Full stop. My educational background is in microbiology, the College of Biological Sciences. Wasn't sure if I would go to maybe do a PhD in microbiology or do cell science or maybe become a physician like my father, who had a 42-year career in pediatrics and he also did public health, epidemiology. True story. One time, my older sister, called my dad's work, and the admin person said, MUSC, epidemiology. And she said, Mom, they're speaking another language. So it was cute. Epidemiology to like an 8-year-old sounds like Greek. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I ended up discovering food science in my junior year of my undergrad. I had a wonderful professor, Dr. Susan Barefoot, at Clemson University. And she had one foot in food science, one in microbiology. And she really inspired me with her passion and her enthusiasm, her knowledge. So she encouraged me to look at maybe getting a master's in food science. Can't harm and might help. And I ended up getting accepted to a really good program at University of Minnesota, moving 1,000 miles away. Really, that was boot camp for my soul, boot camp for my mind, working with a diverse group of people, being completely out of my element and finding a way to swim and learn and make mistakes and take accountability. I had to do a lot of laboratory work and courses, wonderful faculty. And then I ended up completing the master's in 2 years. And then I ended up taking a job down in Florida. So I went from the cold to the heat. And that's where I met my future wife, Dawn. And we are still happily married almost 34 years later. And
Congrats.
worked in Florida for about 4 years at a very small company, about 100 employees, doing testing, research, contract research, pilot plant, that type of thing. Very small, very young, very exciting time. And then I decided that I really wanted to go back and get the doctorate, and this was the time to do it if I'm ever going to do it. So I went and got my doctorate, being about maybe 4 years older than most of the students. And that too, we're going to talk about learning. That was an education. Every student in that laboratory group and my wonderful professor, Dr. Sheldon, Dr. Brian Sheldon, they were all born in another country other than me. I was the sole American. So we had folks from Asia and India and France and Spain and Israel and China. So it was like a United Nations. That was a tremendous opportunity for me to develop my cultural thinking and my cultural agility. even before those buzzwords were more common. So that was a huge blessing. And we really got along quite well as a team and had a lot of laughter. And we all achieved, I think we all achieved our goals and graduated. So that was wonderful. And I'll just to abbreviate it, I've worked for three additional companies after my PhD. All of them are consumer packaged goods. One of them was in the USDA arena, and the other two are, I'm sorry, four other companies, one in the USDA and the other three in the FDA. So I'm a scientist, I'm a microbiologist, I'm a food scientist, I'm a people manager. I'm most skilled in the FDA arena, and then the beverage industry is really where my career took flight. And so those are multi-billion dollar companies, actually. And the biggest one was PepsiCo or Big Blue. And so I had a 19 and a half year career there, going from manager of microbiology just for Tropicana, and then eventually, thankfully, with a lot of hard work and learning and adapting and taking risks, I was promoted up the chain to senior director of the global microbiology team. And this is part of global R&D. So that was my pinnacle, I guess, of responsibility and budget. And it was a wonderful experience. And in the last 5 years or so, I've been leading food safety programs and compliance. So I'm really digging into FDA and making sure we keep our plants operating, our people safe, we can pass audits, we keep our registration. So I'm really in the world of FSMA and FDA now, and I really enjoy it. I hope that helps.
No, it does. And I've already filled up a half a page with notes here because, first of all, I'm about ready to say, okay, I totally respect your technical expertise because, quite frankly, when I was the head of quality and food
Mhm.
safety for a global
Mhm.
flavors company, I relied on really smart technical people like you around me to help make the most difficult decisions, risk-based decisions to assure supply
Mhm.
quality and safety of supply. So I absolutely respect because I have had to call on my global microbiology and food
Yes.
safety leaders. So thank you. I'm going to say it. Thank you for your service and continued service to protect humans. That's what it's all about is mitigate
Yes.
risk, supply a great product, maintain trust, brand loyalty, and keep people safe.
And
Totally
I'd just like
respect
to
it.
say one plug for microbiology. One thing, if folks are listening, and some of our younger listeners, particularly, are folks that are at a point where they might take a new direction or maybe want to focus on an area of food science because it's so broad. What I like about microbiology is it has the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's fermentation, there's beneficial foods, there's managing spoilage, that's the bad, and then of course the ugly are the pathogens. And the core of biology really doesn't change, even though it's a very young field. It was pioneered in the early 1600s, and then really after Darwin in the again Pasteur in the 1800s, it took flight. So it's a pretty young field. Most of microbiology, maybe 150 years, but the core doesn't change. But then the frontiers do change. So when I go to
Mm.
conferences, we're always looking, what's the leading edge? What's the latest thing? Which organism is up and coming? How do we track this organism? So I really like that. Unlike something like computer science, where you get completely upended every so often and have to learn a whole new programming language. I guess I just don't have the patience for that.
Yeah, but you are now the go-to person in the microbiological sphere. And I'm going to bring something up you said before we actually started recording the show because I want you to realize something. So before we started the show and we talk about your different experiences and getting closer to the C-suite and managing that, you said, I'm a microbiologist through and through. I said I'm not into that corporate strategy, but oh my,
Yeah.
in your area of expertise in keeping the food chains safe and what's the next thing that we have to do, you
Hmm.
are a strategist
Thank you.
within your sphere of
Hmm.
technical expertise. So I just want to let you realize that you have to look far into the future and
Hmm.
help create a path for others to follow and do it safely and be curious and just continue to discover.
Hmm.
Wow. So thank you for that. And again, for my listeners, I perhaps we've crossed paths indirectly because I work for companies like Givaudan and IFF, and I know PepsiCo, Tropicana. We're
Yes.
all customers of ours, and you guys were very tough. And companies like ours learn and rise to the occasion because you are so close to the consumer. So again,
Yes.
very important work you do.
Hmm.
Now, I just want to stay a little bit in your career a little bit, just so people understand
Sure.
the opportunities or challenges that you can be faced before we get into probably the more important about being a lifelong learner,
Hmm.
given the extent of your responsibility and the situations that you have been involved in, whether it's technical or with people. What's some of the challenges that you have been through for which maybe you can share a lesson learned with our audience?
I'm so sorry about that. I'm visiting a relative and the phone is ringing. I
Hey,
don't know I'm
in
sorry. I'm
real
returning the
life, and
call.
we may edit that out, or we're going to keep going.
I'm
So,
really sorry. Okay. Sorry about that. Well, I think I'll just say that most of this would my most certainly in graduate school, I learned a lot about working with others, teamwork and individuality and responsibility, and even multiculturalism, et cetera. But I think what I would focus on mostly is PepsiCo. Be wise about which companies you work for. Make sure that their overall approach is aligned with your values. You feel good about the overall about the product line, and PepsiCo's all about choices. We used to talk about fun for you, better for you, and good for you, kind of meeting all of those occasions, right? Um, and so try to find a company that matches up with your values. And also, are they mature in terms of their human resources? When I do interviews for some of the career changes I've made, I want to know how they reward people, how do they promote people? I'm thinking my people manager skills here. Do you have a career development ladder? PepsiCo had an excellent one. And then some of my friends, the director of engineering, he articulated that even more so that people could see, what do I need to know? What do I need to do? How do I need to lead? What skills do I need? And including adaptability or thinking on your feet. So if you're at a company and they do not have a career development ladder, you're not in a really good place. I mean, don't leave the company, pay your bills, get your health insurance. But I would challenge your audience, aspire to be at a company that has a mature people development system that will back you up as a people leader so you can promote your people. One thing we did at PepsiCo, this is very small, but perhaps promotions were limited because of the financials that particular year, but there might be a pool of money. We would like to reward an extra compensation on the base for those who are really delivering, or maybe they've matured and gone from a risk to a solid. And I thought that was ingenious. It doesn't always have to be a title. Sometimes a little extra money will make a big difference, or going to a flexible vacation. So that's one. The next one is it's not a meritocracy. So this comes from the book Survival of the Savvy, Lombardo and Eichinger, I believe. Most of us at director and up, we had to read that book, and it was very much some of the case studies in that book come from Big Blue, but many years ago. The people are gone now. So a lot of career coaching for executives. So it's not a meritocracy, although you want to work for someone who values the good work you do, but you need to find a way to humbly and authentically promote the good things you've done. And so that could be a whole nother podcast, but a very simple example is an email. Hi, team, writing to the cross-functional team, the packaging people, the procurement people, whatever, the operations. I've got some great news. We have a new insight. Working with Ben, working with Miguel, working with Lisa, we've discovered that we can leverage this type of data to speed up the process of qualifying these new labelers or something like that. So you're sharing good news, you're sharing credit because if you don't, you lose trust. But you're not you're trumpeting something good and you're having an evidence that you can put in your file. This is something good that I accomplished, and then you hold your breath and you hope that some kind person who's not immature will say you will recognize that or show some love, show some appreciation. So you need to let people know the good things you're doing. And I learned that from one of our VPs when we had budget cuts and we lost an entire small group of about 5 people. People didn't see the value. The value needs to be above the waterline. The last things I would say, do you want to respond to that or would you like me to just go on?
why don't you give me one more, and then I'm
Okay.
going to respond because I
Okay.
you're in flow, and I want you to keep
Yeah.
going.
Okay. The last one would be,
Yeah.
it comes from your book, actually, The CEO's Compass. Invest in your people. No matter what you do, unless you're an author sitting on an island, you know, all by yourself writing these amazing books, it's a people business. So we need to treat people well. And one of the biggest things, and we need to recognize their strengths. We need to encourage their development, even if selfishly, I don't want them to leave my team and stretch their wings and get an MBA and go to product development and leave microbiology. I'm far better off investing in them and thinking about what will they say about Jay when let's say I have a premature, I'm gone from this world because of a car accident or something. How will they remember me? Think about the ending. And I would rather develop them and see them fly my nest than to hold on to them and limit them, and they'll leave anyway because this is America. It's a free country where I'm sitting. So develop your people. They're your strength. They're not your threat to your job. They're your strength, and let's leverage them. And what I'm good at, and it may be different than what they're good at. Find people who complement your strengths. That's it.
Oh my God. I'm getting shivers here because first of all, thank you for thank you for referencing my book.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
I learned that late in life. There was an operations person that
Hmm.
sometimes when I was the quality leader, they wouldn't deliver on my action items. So I would go to their office, have a conversation. When can I get X, Y, and Z? And they said, I've been really busy. I've been focusing on my people. I said, if you serve the people, give the people the resources that they need, they're
Yeah.
going to take care of you. And I didn't
Mhm.
appreciate it at the time. Fast
Mhm.
forward, oh my goodness, in my book, The CEO's Compass, we talk about when we talk about solving issues, if you're off track, let's invest more in people, more in training, let's get more equipment. No, no, no. Closing the
Mhm.
gaps in people's performance, whether
Mhm.
it's their confidence, capability,
Mhm.
capacity, because you hired good people. You didn't hire
Yeah.
them to be mediocre.
Mhm.
You hired good people, and our role is to unleash their potential. And you hit
Yes.
on another thing about, if you lose them, I mean, when we have to unfortunately put people in a 9 box sometimes when it comes to
Yeah.
reviews, lower
Yeah.
right, they better be on their way out
Mhm.
or have a pip. High achievers, give them some coaching, etc. But what about those steady eddies in the middle? I mean,
Exactly.
sometimes leaders say I depend on them because they keep things
Mhm.
stable. We should be doing everything we can to ask questions. What would you do differently? And get them
Mhm.
to being a high performer. And if they
Yeah.
leave, our
Mhm.
legacy is how we made people feel and how we supported them. They'll forget the results and that report and that
Exactly. They'll remember
presentation.
your authenticity, your integrity. And another simple little rabbit trail is there's a famous book called The Five Love Languages, which deals with relationships and parenting and spouses. But it's similar. We worked a bit on that in the R&D microbiology group of, well, how do we build culture? And part of it is how do we make people feel appreciated? For some people, it's only about money and title, and that's really hard because at a big corporation, those are rare. These promotions can be challenging. But other people, it's recognition, or it's a note, or it's a lunch. And then my favorite one was for some people, doing a talk and presenting their work is terrorizing. It just generates all those anxieties and fears, and just like public speaking often does. For other people, that's a real opportunity for them to shine. And when I first started at Tropicana, the senior vice president said, I want your people in food safety and quality, not me, I wasn't the leader, but I was leading the microbiology. I want only to hear from level 9 and below. I don't want any tens. I don't want any managers, directors. And so you're giving the rank and file, those hardworking people, a chance to present their work in their words. And in general, it was a very successful way to make them feel engaged. So spend some time thinking about how do you make your people feel appreciated, because each of us really is unique.
So before we go into some the topics that you're very
Sure.
passionate about, and I'm
Hmm.
sure you do a lot of speaking, but what percent of your speaking is
Oh.
technical and what percent
Mm.
of your speaking is just sharing experiences, stories, and work pearls of wisdom?
Um, Deb, pretty much all of it is technical, but it tends to be about programs and things like that. I tried to feather in conversations about culture,
You
and food
should.
safety culture actually has become a science now, not just an idea floating
Okay.
in the atmosphere, but the FDA is actually auditing. So is the SQF and the GFSI, FSSC. They actually have a checklist. Every auditor needs a checklist, right? Their best friend. And they actually are looking for certain behaviors. They're interviewing folks on the operating line. Why is this a critical control point? Why does that matter? Why is the metal detector? What happens if it goes out? So I'm starting to get to use that part of my brain that is very social and leadership, but most of my talks would be technical in nature.
Well, I just want to say if you haven't done too many interviews, you might consider
Mhm.
just that sharing more of the thoughts that are might be more long lasting. The technical
Mhm.
is absolutely critical,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
I am really enjoying you
Well,
talking
thank you.
about your perspectives and what we can
Thank you.
bequeath to the next generation. But let's go into an area where you're quite passionate about around lifelong learning. Again, obviously you're well educated and it sounds like you read quite a bit and quote lots of
Yeah.
authors. But just let's get clear, just level set a little bit. What does it mean to be a lifelong learner?
Okay, I wanted to begin with just a very brief. We're going to talk today a little bit about first principles. So these are fundamentals, right? Just like nutrition is we're all worried about what we're eating. We're very focused on that. Everybody has an opinion about food, but a lot of it is variety, moderation, and sanitation. Because I'm a microbiologist, I can eat the freshest vegetable anywhere, but if it's washed in water filled with coliform and other bacteria, that's bad. So I really begin this topic. I'm very passionate, and I do want to say a tribute to my father who passed away almost 5 years ago, Stan, my mother Joanna, who I'm visiting. They have always talked about ideas at the dinner table. They are well read. They're creative people, but also quite deep in terms of their very deep readers, and they've continued their education through the internet, through lifelong learning courses and things like that throughout their 70s, 80s, and even my mother just is 91. So Stephen Covey, well-known author, in 1989, long time ago now, he published a book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And then he had a follow-up called The Eighth Habit, which is also kind of interesting. The first three principles all relate to learning. Be proactive. It takes energy. You have to decide to do this, just like going to the gym or doing your bike ride or your jog. Number two, begin with the end in mind. Where does this all leading? And that's so important to your life, your health, your relationships outside of work and at work. Where is this going to lead? Don't just do what's expedient, do what's wise. And then lastly,
Mm.
put first things first. So my little contribution to wisdom, I call this fortune cookie wisdom, as my children are now adults. My daughter Andrea and my son Nathan are both in their 20s and are on the beginning their careers and are out of the nest. I'm very thankful for them and proud of them. So I would say, like, if I had to say, at the very end of my life, what would be some of my regrets? And what would be many people's regrets that I've crossed paths with? And I think we've lived in six different states in the U.S., never lived overseas, just visited overseas to so many countries. And I would say we probably will regret that we dared too little and we spoke too much. Okay, I dared too little. I didn't have the courage maybe to go out on a limb or to take that lateral move or to risk going to a smaller company for a bigger role or maybe just hiking the Appalachian Trail while you still have vigor in your body. So we dare too little and we say too much because our mouths get us in trouble. We say something in haste. We're tired. Anybody who's married is like, oh yeah. You say something late at night or you're paying bills and you're really stressed out. You say something that wasn't put in the proper context. So those are two things that we will say. But what I'd like to add today, which is new as I thought about this conversation, is that maybe we learned a lot. Maybe you really did learn a lot. Maybe you're super educated, but did I apply enough of what I learned to make a difference in my life,
Oh,
my career, and others? So dare too little, speak too much, and maybe applied too little of what I learned. So if you, the folks in the audience, want to differentiate yourself from the crowd, if you want to soar like an eagle, work on your critical thinking, work on your continuous learning, and be an observer, be an acute observer of the good and bad outcomes that you see happening in the people around you. You can learn a ton just going to a meeting or a conference or a
oh
big
yeah.
decision meeting where your boss has to make tough choices. Just observe how he or she handles that. Do they keep their cool? Are they persuasive? How do they handle rejection? You can learn so much just by observing and reflecting. So, ready to move on? I'm going to talk now. We'll get into the main
Well,
topic.
but let me just interject and
Sure.
compliment what you're saying because there's
Yeah.
book learning and there's life learning. So being
Yes.
a lifetime long
Yes.
learner, but studying life and people can be a tremendous lesson because you can study,
Yes.
study, study and build your
Yeah.
skills, but being quiet, speaking less, and
Yes.
observing the influence, who has the power in the word, what language resonates
hmm
and
hmm
doesn't, you can quickly build skills to be able to, when you do speak with authority, speak with confidence, or in the meantime, you're modeling somebody else's behavior and
Yes.
seeing if it works to get a different outcome. So
hmm
be well read, study, learn different cultures, and also study the body language and the room as well. So back to you,
Yes,
Jay.
and you can also, and when you're observing those leaders, you can take notes. I recommend writing them on paper, that old-fashioned thing. If you put them on
Absolutely.
your phone, older generations like me may think that you're texting or something. If so, it's good. But and I heard that one of our well-known famous presidents, he would assemble these quotes and he had them on 3x5 cards, and that's kind of the way I'm wired. Either I like it or not. I collect bits of wisdom. I collect phrases. What's the why behind the what, or we don't know what we don't know. These are well-known, tried and true phrases. Or one of the senior VPs at PepsiCo, she would say, "I'm going to do my pre-mumble." I'm like, "Oh, that's so cute." She meant preamble, but she's being very humble. And I'm like, that's a good way to make people feel comfortable that you're
Steal
the senior
shamelessly.
VP. I'm going to do my pre-mumble. So what does it mean to be a lifelong learner? And I hope I don't sound like I know it all. I'm just sharing what I've learned so far. One of my quotes, and I have a lot of little proverbs. You'll probably hear a lot of them today as we go on. I believe that we're a student for a season, right? We're enrolled in some sort of program, but the wisest among us are learners for life. So that's kind of true. I'm not talking about learning for learning's sake or trying to be the most knowledgeable person in the world. That's pride and that's trivial. What I'm talking about is, and I just got this definition this morning. Um, to be a lifelong learner is to make a conscious commitment to dedicate a certain portion of my time each day. We each only have so many hours in a day to add to my valued and useful knowledge base. The kinds of knowledge that I am referring to are what I would call credible bits of information and insights. And when we collect enough of those and really meditate on them or concentrate on them, we can develop wisdom. So we naturally say, what is wisdom? The best definition I learned, I think, in high school. Wisdom is knowledge guided by understanding. Okay, so knowledge is kind of like the motor on the motorboat, and the wisdom is the rudder or the steering, and making sure that it's guided, because that knowledge alone just puffs us up, or it may actually lead us to take the safe path rather than to take a calculated risk.
Mm.
Um, and then I'm going to quote something from the Bible. I am a person who reads the Bible on a regular basis, and I'm a follower. I'm a follower of Christ, a decision I made when I was 14. Proverbs 4, verse 7, written 3,000 years ago, says, "Getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do. And whatever else you do, develop good judgment." Okay?
Ooh.
Wisdom is the wisest. Whatever else you do, get good judgment. That's King Solomon, one of the wisest and most wealthy leaders that existed in history. And you can read more about that I guess, in the Old Testament. So my next quick topic: how can we acquire knowledge? And I want you to think about this, everybody, because as you're listening and thinking, you're developing your own knowledge. You're also exercising your brain, which is one of the benefits of learning, as opposed to just watching or scrolling or watching little videos. And I do watch movies and I do take a break. So we can read what we learn, and that's a really good way to learn, because you can underline, you can make notes, you can highlight with your digital tablet. We listen, like this podcast. We can also listen to others that we either respect, or maybe we're fearful. I don't want to go down that path. That person is the least liked manager in the department. I do not. So I'm going to use him, let's just say he, as a negative example, things to avoid. We can also, in addition to reading and listening, we can watch. We can watch videos. We can watch TED Talks. We can also listen to TED Talks, which I do quite often. And we can take courses online, which is wonderful because we can do them anywhere, anytime, at home. I love online learning. And then the last thing, besides observing others, which I think we've talked about in a good way, is reflecting.
Mm.
Taking that pause time, turning off the device, and just reflecting on, what did I learn? How might it apply to me and where I'm at in my journey? And how can I become a bit better as a human being, as a person, as a manager, as a senior leader, or a CEO? One thing that came to my mind, I'm not a CEO, but you can sometimes read autobiography of a CEO who's completed the journey, and they talk about their challenges and some of their regrets. And that is a good way to learn from others.
I want to interject,
Yes.
even though you're in flow right now,
Yeah.
because I want this also to be a lesson for my listeners.
Yeah.
And you just said, I am not a CEO.
Yeah.
And what I propose is a shift in mindset. CEO
Mhm.
is just a title. But what do CEOs do? They go into situations,
Mhm.
assess the landscape, understand what's good, what's working, and what is not. They see the path to get to a better place, and it's how they can muster resources and share with people a better place to get to, and then build the capability and the confidence of the
Mhm.
people in your domain. When you
Mhm.
walk into a situation, a new initiative, a new plant,
Mhm.
etc., you become the CEO of the food safety microbiological domain.
That's true.
So think about it. I
That's
just
true.
want you to know that. You can.
No, thank you. Yes, and that's true. And if you're a project leader or a program leader, yes, you and this is a good chance to give a plug for PepsiCo because these are things I carry with me forever, is the definition of a leader at PepsiCo, at least while I was there with a different CEO than now, was leaders set the agenda, right? Where are we going and how quickly are we going?
There you go.
They garner support and galvanize resources, whether that's human resources, consultants, capital, advertising, agencies, whatever. So set the agenda, garner support at the senior level, and then it's taking others with you, which is so
Yeah.
rich. That's a whole topic. That's emotional intelligence, motivation, motivating in a positive way, not out of anxiety and fear of failure. And then the last one is doing it the right way, and that is like a diamond. There are so many facets, and one of them, by the way, is doing it legally, not cutting corners, not collusion and all this stuff. But there's so many aspects of doing it the right way. And so I really felt like I learned a lot there. It's almost like getting a miniature MBA if you really drink deeply of the leadership lessons of a fast-paced company like PepsiCo or some of the companies you've worked for. So, so the next one I'd like to emphasize is the key to becoming a wiser person or more skilled. And this is an old-fashioned word. If those parents out there, if you're raising small children, there's a book by William Bennett, who was the Secretary of Education many years ago, and it's called The Book of Virtues, another very old word. But these old things are treasured paths. And one of the most important keys to becoming wiser is humility.
Mm.
Okay, very simple word. And at PepsiCo, we would talk about things like slow down the knee jerk, be open-minded, don't rush to judgment just because it's a
Yes.
new way of doing things, a new way of thinking. Another one that is another phrase I learned at PepsiCo was I reserve the right to get smarter. Love that. I reserve the right
Oh,
to get smarter.
it's almost
Such a
forgive me if I
well,
don't know everything, but give me some time. I'm
Mhm,
going to get
sure.
smarter today, tomorrow, the
Yes.
next day.
And the flip side of that, I read it on LinkedIn this last week. It's something like, I am done with feeling the need to vocalize my opinion on areas in which I am not well informed. You don't have to be an expert. You do not need to be Einstein or, Steve Jobs, but sometimes it is best just to remain silent or say, I don't have anything to add, but this has been extremely helpful. Or maybe you can ask a really thoughtful question. If you ask a really thoughtful and intelligent question, your stock goes up. You are viewed as intelligent and you're being humble because you're listening. So don't forget the value of questions.
This is a
Um,
treasure trove of
yeah,
insight. So
thank you.
keep going, Jay. I love this.
So,
Keep going.
so now I'm going to quote Patrick Lencioni. So I've not read most of his books, but he's written several really best-selling books on leadership and team development. So a surprise hit for him is called The Ideal Team Player. It's a very slim book. You can read it in 1 or 2 evenings, and part of it is sort of a metaphor or an analogy. When it all comes down to it, what makes an employee treasured as a team player? And guess what? The really good team players are usually on the short list to take over the leadership when the leader may move on the succession. So he came up with 3 things from extensive surveys of his clients. They must be humble. That's number one. That's why we're talking. Humble is first. It's the sort of the ticket that gets you in the door. Second is hungry. And it doesn't just mean hungry for promotions or titles or a company car or a fancy office in the corner. No, it's hungry to learn, hungry to help, hungry to further develop my human potential. And then the last one is smart. So each of these can be misinterpreted, and this podcast is not about this topic. I do recommend the book to you, but humble is very important. And the only one I would add, if Patrick ever asked me, was you've got to be ethical, you've got to be trustworthy, right? You can have all 3 of those and still actually be a flawed person that might lead the company in a wrong direction. So absolutely, you lead with your ethics. You lead with your. So we must be humble. And so to learn, we have to say there's things I don't know. There's more I need to learn. And when we turn that lens on ourselves, when we get feedback that we may find hard to take, um,
Oh,
it's tough if the manager is very blunt. Maybe that person is very direct, and they may even have a cultural element where they don't know how to wrap some tough feedback in maybe some gold foil. like a nice
Yes.
pear that you get for Christmas. It's nice to wrap the negative feedback in something kind, maybe leading with something kind and telling the person you have their best interest in mind. But even if the person giving you the feedback doesn't have your best interest, even if they're coarse, there's usually a little kernel of truth there that
Oh,
I need to apply.
amen.
And it takes a
Amen.
lot of humility to say, okay, I'm going to forget the noise. I'm going to focus on the signal, the actual
Oh,
truth.
yes.
I do need to be more concise. And that's something I struggle with. Or I do need to speak more like a business person and less like a brainy scientist. Or I do need to, in our case at Tropicana, recently we had a situation where some people needed to get in the factory and just be on the floor more. And that really elevated trust. So look for the kernel of truth. Try not to have your feelings hurt, but it does take humility to take that feedback and then apply it.
And time, because if you do a knee jerk reaction to what they say,
Mhm.
you may harm the relationship versus
Mhm.
embracing the gift of the feedback, reflect and come
Mhm.
back. And you might even say thank you to that person and how you're going to internalize it. Back to
Yes.
you.
And so, and then I quote another one from the scriptures. This is the New Testament about 2,000 years ago, the little book of James, chapter 1, 19. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry or provoked. This is a jewel of wisdom. So many marriages, so many parent-child relationships, so many, when you get Thanksgiving and you see the uncles and aunts, just think if everybody had that on a sign like that in the kitchen. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. So this is ancient wisdom, and it takes humility to do that. So I'm ready to transition now to the value and benefits of being a lifelong learner. Is that okay? Or should we?
Absolutely,
Okay.
because my listeners are eating this
Okay.
up, but I also want
Okay.
to make sure we bring this to a
Fine.
natural close. So
Okay.
please share this pearl of wisdom as well.
Okay. The value is really tremendous. Um, First of all, getting new information, it fills your personal toolbox with a set of tools that you can use. What do you need to understand about the business, the marketing strategy, the engineering, the way we make our products, let's say if you're in the food industry, or the way we deliver a service if you're dealing with, let's say, food service, so it adds tools to your toolbox. I think all of us would come up with that. It's not really very insightful in some ways, but it's also a healthy habit. It will help strengthen your brain chemistry. It will strengthen your memory, improve your mental health, and it can even help ward off certain neurological conditions. And this is scientific humor. There's only one of me. So if I didn't spend time learning, if I just sat and watched Netflix or just read magazines and just talked about trivial things, I'll never know what the impact would be on my brain because there's just one of me. There's no control set, right? But I think there's enough evidence that when we're reading, when we're thinking, when we're reflecting, we're activating portions of our brain and that are more passive when we're just looking out the window. There's times to just look out the window and watch the world go by, but you can also sometimes meditate on an airplane. What went well? What didn't go well? Who do I need to kind of make amends with? Maybe I came across a little too blunt. So spend time, reflecting. I think that's very valuable. It can also help your physical health. Now that sounds silly. I go to the gym. I've had a major back surgery about 3.5 years ago. It really changed my life, improved my health, and let me get back into the gym where I do exercises and things like resistance training. And I would say 95% of the people in the gym are doing those exercises the incorrect way. The only reason I know is because I was very fortunate at 22 years old to have someone who coached me at this particular gym where they had these physical therapists, and they taught me the right way to do it. The people that do it wrong will actually injure their joints and their knees, and they may end up with knee replacements and things like that. Um, the last two topics, real quickly, how do we find sources of good, credible information? And I don't have the answers. I encourage all of us to share, or maybe you can share it in the comments, your ideas, because words are cheap. We're all swimming in this like Olympic swimming pool filled with claims and advertisements and ideas and criticisms and likes and these trolls. And so everybody has a microphone, but how do you find trusted information? And it's hard, and I don't have all the answers, but I would say try to go to the original source if you can, like on science. Can you actually read the abstract? Or if it's a business journal, can you go to the actual paper, not what someone says about the paper? try to go back, like if you're dealing with health questions or nutrition. Another one is maybe find something that has stood the test of time.
Mm,
For me, a little booklet called The Golden Book by Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie was born in the late 1800s. And this book was published in 1936. It's about 700 words, but I'm telling you, it's gold. It's leadership gold.
mm,
And many books that you read today, long after Dale Carnegie passed away, and I think in the mid 1950s, they're riffing off of that or they're rediscovering the same thing. And that's another principle for everybody. If you see something repeated at your different jobs, maybe you were in the military, and then you worked for an NGO, and then you worked for a private business, or maybe you worked at a big corporation and then a small business. If you keep seeing these principles repeating themselves, they're probably true. They're
mm,
facts of life in the world we live in. And just like math, certain math equations show up in physics and then they show up in mechanical engineering. Well, there's no coincidence. They're true. And so try to find good, reliable sources and authors you trust. And then when you're listening to someone who is pouring into you, maybe they're having a lunch with you, someone you really, maybe you only get one lunch in your whole life with this senior leader, really listen, really focus, and really listen with what we call ting. And it's a Chinese symbol that I learned years ago, and it means listen with the ear, listen with the eye, paying attention, listen with your mind, and listen with your heart.
mm.
And then you really will get the most out of that interaction.
Beautiful.
So that's the next
Uh,
principle.
and do you have anything else? Because I'd love to respond and start summarizing where we've gone here because it's been absolutely beautiful.
I'd say the very last thing, Deb, is just there's a sacrifice. Everything comes with a cost that has a lot of value, like a precious jewel or restoring a car, over 10 years or longer. We each have 168 hours a week, so we have to make choices. We need to be thoughtful how we spend our limited time. And you can't spend all the time on a treadmill learning because you can only absorb so much. But I encourage you, find those areas maybe where you're weak, where you can bring that up in your leadership and become solid and take those areas where you're really strong and maybe take them to the next level. But try not to be below average in any area of your leadership that you think is important to your success. And I guess I'll stop there.
No, but this has been amazing. First of all, this has been an absolute delight. I had no idea what to expect. And when I
Mhm.
asked one of those questions early on about when you do speak, is it more technical or is it around your thought leadership? He said, well, they're
Mhm.
usually called upon for your technical. I might suggest to you, after hearing all of your pearls of wisdom, stealing shamelessly from amazing sources, that you already have your next talk
Okay.
and you already have
Oh, thank you.
probably all 9 to 12 chapters of a book and
Mm.
leaving your legacy and sharing your wisdom with
Mm.
others. I just want to leave that pearl or thought with you, or
Wow.
whatever
Thank
you,
you.
wherever you might want to go with that. You have a legacy to lead, not just by how you made them feel, but your voice
No, thank
you
you.
heard. So this has been an amazing conversation, far exceeded my expectations. I want my audience, first of all, just to check you out on LinkedIn, follow you, what have you. But I just want to give you the floor just a minute more. How can people get a hold of you? How to connect with you? Because I want people to know Jay Schumann, PhD, man of wisdom. Last words.
Sure. No, this has been a real pleasure. It's the first time I've actually done this kind of thing, so I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I would say I'm on LinkedIn. I have my email address there. I have a Gmail address there. Or Deb has my Gmail, so I'm fine with that. I'll also be attending the IAFP meeting in Cleveland at the end of July. That's International Association of Food Protection. So several thousand folks will be there. Maybe we could connect through the app if you want to have a cup of coffee or something like that. And I just want to say I'm on a journey. These are things that I do at my best moments. I live this way and I'm constantly learning and I'm trying to apply it. But you really do learn the most by doing. So if you're holding back from trying something or stretching your wings or maybe doing a critical experience at work that might develop your management skills, that's something Deb and I talked about last time we chatted on the phone. I encourage you to do it and do it in a smart way and learn constantly. So I'd be happy to connect with various people. And like I said, I'm on a journey and I definitely reserve the right to get wiser. So
All
thank
right.
you for this time.
Jay, I just want to say thank you so much for dropping in on the show. And I just want to wish you well, continued success, and we're going to stay in touch. So thank you again.
Okay. You're welcome.